In a locked palace, Russia's emperor fights for breath while his own guards pin him to the floor. The men sworn to protect him are counting the seconds until he stops moving. By the end, you'll understand how a late-night palace raid became an assassination, why the plotters believed they had no other option, and how one death rewired the Russian Empire's future. A single murder inside the Green Chamber doesn't just end a life. It decides who controls an empire, who gets branded a traitor, and who can order thousands to die the next morning as if nothing happened. Was Tsar Paul I killed by a conspiracy that got out of hand, or by a plan that was always meant to end with his death? The door gives way with a crack that feels too loud for a palace. Boots rush over polished floors. A man in a nightshirt stumbles back into candlelight. He is not dressed like a tyrant. He looks like someone who woke up sick. A voice snaps a single word. Enough. Hands grab at his arms. Someone yanks at his collar. The room is cramped. The air is thick with sweat and wax and panic. In the chaos, the crown of Russia is suddenly just a frightened head on a pillow. This is the Green Chamber. It is supposed to be safe. It is inside the most protected building in the empire, and on this night, inside these walls, a Tsar is about to die. Not in a war, not on a battlefield, not with a rifle shot from a distance. He will die close up. Surrounded, his name is Paul. Tsar Paul. And for the men who have come for him, the terrifying part is not what they are doing. It is what happens after they succeed. Because the moment Paul stops breathing, there will be a question no one can answer out loud. If the Tsar can be killed in his own bedroom, who is safe in Russia? To understand how it comes to this, you have to step back from the moment of violence, back from the hands on his throat, back from the broken door. You have to meet Paul as more than a victim. He is the son of Catherine the Great. That fact alone is a curse and a weapon. In the court, people look at him and see a question mark. Is he truly her son? Was he kept from power on purpose? Was he shaped by humiliation? For decades, Paul waits. He watches his mother rule. He watches her favorites rise and fall. He learns what power looks like from a distance. And distance can make a man hungry. When Catherine dies, Paul finally becomes Tsar. It is 1796. He is in his 40s. He is in his 40s. He is not new to anger. He is not new to suspicion, and he does not arrive softly. He starts changing things immediately. He changes uniforms. He changes court rules. He changes how people move, how they bow, what they can wear, what they can say. The court feels the shift in its bones. Paul wants discipline. He wants obedience. He wants to prove that his mother's Russia is over, but the people around him feel something else. They feel unpredictability. They feel fear. A reform can be argued with. A mood cannot. So the question begins to spread, first in whispers, then in glances. Is this a ruler who can be managed, or a ruler who will break everyone who stands too close? Paul's world is built on hierarchy, on the idea that a single will should shape the state, yet he is surrounded by men who survived Catherine's long reign by reading the wind. They are experts at adapting. They are experts at waiting. Now they have to read Paul. And Paul is difficult to read. He can be charming. He can be generous. Then he can turn cold in a sentence. He issues orders that reach into tiny corners of life. He punishes negligence harshly. Sometimes he punishes imagined disrespect. For officers and nobles, honor is not just pride, it is survival. If the Tsar believes you laughed at the wrong time, you can lose everything. In this atmosphere, loyalty becomes a performance. People smile carefully, they speak carefully, they move carefully. And careful living does something to a court. It teaches people to look for exits. In the palaces of St. Petersburg, there is another truth, old as the dynasty itself. The Romanov crown is heavy, and it has changed hands through violence before. If you want to see the danger, watch where Paul chooses to sleep. He does not trust the old palaces. He wants a fortress, a place built for control. He builds and moves into the Mikhailovsky castle, a strange, moated, defensive residence. Not a home, a redoubt. A Tsar who lives in a castle in his own capital is not sending a message of confidence. He is sending a message of fear, and if the ruler is afraid, what are the people around him planning to do with that fear? Quick recap. Here's what we know so far, and the one detail that still doesn't fit. If this was just a forced abdication, why did the conspirators bring a scarf, and why did it end up around the Tsar's neck? Who packed the one object you can't explain away as politics? Stop thinking of this as a midnight brawl. Think of it as paperwork, because the real weapon may have been a signature that never happened. The Mikhailovsky castle rises like a statement. The walls look protected. The bridges can be raised. The corridors can be watched. Paul believes architecture can protect him. But a fortress has a weakness that a palace does not. It makes everyone think like soldiers. At night, the castle is a maze. Lamps throw thin halos of light. Guards stand in doorways. Shadows pool in corners. Doors creak. Floors whisper under footsteps. Paul thinks he is finally secure. The irony is cruel because the threat is not outside the castle. It is inside his own circles. It is in the officers he promoted and insulted. It is in the nobles he frightened and humiliated. And it is in the closest layer of power where decisions are made quietly. A conspiracy does not start as a plan to kill. It starts as a complaint. Then it becomes a pattern. Then a group of men realize they are all thinking the same forbidden thought. And once that thought exists, it does not go away. It grows. The question becomes less about whether Paul is difficult. It becomes about whether the empire can survive him. But who gets to decide what survive means? Paul's bedroom wasn't just a room. It was a trap of doors, corridors, and guards. So how did the attackers reach him without setting off the palace? Which key turned first? Among the men who circled this crisis are powerful nobles and military officers. Their reputations are built on service. Their status is built on access. And access cuts both ways. They know the routines of the palace. They know where guards stand. They know which doors can be opened without making a scene. Most importantly, they know the habits of the Tsar. A ruler's habits are a kind of map. Paul's habits are those of a man who cannot relax. He checks. He demands. He changes his mind. He expects the world to betray him, and he may not be wrong. Because there is also the question of succession. Paul has a son, Alexander. In monarchies, a son is supposed to be continuity, a bridge from one reign to the next. But a son can also be a solution, a conspiracy-like solution. It is one thing to complain about a Tsar. It is another to replace him with a plausible alternative. Alexander is young. He is admired. He is admired. He is seen as calmer, more modern, more acceptable to the elite. So the thought takes shape: if Paul cannot be controlled, and if Alexander can, then Russia might be saved by a single night. But saved for whom? And if a son benefits from his father's fall, can he stay clean? The men at the center of this plot weren't strangers from the street. They were decorated nobles and officers with everything to lose. So what did Paul do that made them risk a noose? For a moment, forget the Tsar and watch the hallway guards. Because one quiet order there decides whether this is a coup or a murder. As pressure builds, the conspiracy needs more than anger. It needs coordination. It needs men who can act. And it needs a story that the actors can live with afterward. Because the hardest part of political murder is not the murder. It is the mourning. The conspirators begin to tell themselves they are not criminals. They are patriots. They are guardians of stability. They frame Paul as a danger to the state. But even in their own minds, there is a shifting line. Are they planning a forced abdication, or are they planning death? In the beginning, some men insist it will be abdication, a signature, a quiet removal. They say they will spare the blood. That is what conspiracies promise themselves. Until the night arrives and nothing goes to plan. Meanwhile, Paul senses something. He is paranoid, yes. But paranoia is sometimes just early recognition. He tightens control. He distrusts. He isolates. And isolates makes him more vulnerable. Because when you push people away, you also push away the ones who might warn you. So on the eve of the end, the castle is full of men who pretend they belong. Guards, officers, courtiers, and among them, a group with a shared secret. If Paul sees them coming, what can he do in time? Quick recap. Here's what we know so far, and the one detail that still doesn't fit. One name keeps surfacing in whispers, the heir himself. Did Alexander know the raid would end in blood, or was he handed the crown after the fact? The night of the assassination begins like many nights in a palace. There is routine, there are sentries, there are closing doors. There is the private life of a ruler who cannot truly be private. Then the routine bends. A small group gathers with purpose. They drink, they steady themselves, they confirm their roles without saying too much. Some are brave, some are reckless, some are simply trapped by what they have already agreed to. In these moments, men often search for something to blame. They blame Paul, they blame fate, they blame the country. They avoid blaming themselves. They move through corridors that they have walked 100 times. But now each step feels different. Now the castle is not a home. It is a target. They reach the door to the Tsar's rooms. Someone expects resistance. Someone expects a signature. No one truly knows what will happen when the door opens. And that is the first truth of the Green Chamber. It is a room where uncertainty becomes violence. But who among the men at the door is actually in control? There's a moment in the Green Chamber where the plan fractures, and someone makes a decision in real time. Who was the first man to cross the line from coercion to killing? Now rewind 10 minutes, because the fatal mistake isn't in the Green Chamber, it's in the step just before anyone opens the door. The door is forced. The group surges in. Paul is awakened by noise and intrusion. He demands to know what this is. He tries to assert authority with his voice. A Tsar's voice is supposed to stop time. This time it does not. Men crowd him. They shout accusations. They present demands. They speak of abdication. Paul refuses. Or he tries to bargain. Or he tries to escape. Accounts differ, and that matters. Because every witness to a palace killing becomes an author. Everyone edits themselves. Everyone finds a version that makes them look less guilty. In the crush of bodies, a paper is brought forward. The idea is simple. Sign. Step aside. Live. But nothing about this room is simple. Paul is cornered. He is panicking. The conspirators are panicking too. One shove becomes another. An argument becomes a struggle. And then the moment arrives when someone decides that the problem is not Paul's rule. The problem is Paul's breathing. In a narrow space, men do not need weapons to kill. They need only hands. They need only fabric. They need only the courage to go past the point where you can still turn back. When that point is crossed, the Green Chamber becomes a trap for everyone inside it. Because after the Tsar falls, how do you tell the world what happened here? The conspirators claim Paul fought like a cornered animal, but the official story needs him to die quietly. So which witness is lying, and what are they protecting? The struggle ends. The room settles into a horrible quiet. Paul is down. A man checks him. Another stares. Someone breathes hard, like he has run a long distance. There is a pause in which everyone understands the same thing. They have done it. Now they must survive it. The conspirators leave the room with urgency, not triumph, not celebration, urgency. Because the castle is full of guards who still think the Tsar is alive. Because servants might have heard. Because the entire empire is balanced on what happens in the next hour. And because there is one person who must be brought into this new reality. Alexander, the heir. He is the key that makes the act look like succession instead of chaos, but the key is also a human being, a son. What do you say to the man who will become Tsar because his father has just been killed? And what if he already knows more than he admits? Quick recap. Here's what we know so far, and the one detail that still doesn't fit. If Paul was so dangerous, why didn't they arrest him in daylight with the entire army behind them? What were they afraid Paul could do before sunrise? Here's the uncomfortable part. Even the men who hated Paul didn't agree on how far to go, and that split is where the killing begins. Somewhere in the castle, Alexander is reached. He is told that something has happened. The words matter. The tone matters. The tone matters. The choice to be vague matters. In courts, vagueness is often mercy. But it is also a test. If Alexander asks the wrong question, he reveals what he suspects. If he asks no questions, he reveals something else. This is the knife edge of legitimacy. Because a new Tsar cannot appear too eager, yet he must appear decisive. The conspirators need him to accept the throne quickly. They need a smooth transition. They need the guards to stand down. They need the city to wake to a new name without waking to a civil war. Alexander's face in that moment is not just a face, it is the future. If he refuses, the conspirators are murderers with no cover. If he accepts, he becomes a ruler born from a night of violence. And the palace will watch for one thing. Guilt. Does Alexander act like a man receiving a crown, or like a man receiving a debt? Paul's habits were obsessive, even paranoid. He designed routines to stop exactly this kind of attack. So how did the plotters predict his movements down to the minute? Morning approaches. The castle begins to stir. Servants move quietly. Guards shift positions. The machinery of a royal household continues because it has to. Then the announcement comes. Paul is dead. The explanation, if offered, is carefully shaped. A sudden illness, a stroke, an accident. Something that does not require a courtroom. Something that does not require names. In an autocratic system, truth is not a public right. It is a controlled substance, and this is a moment when too much truth would poison the entire state. But rumors do not need permission. They leak through doors. Some people are relieved, some are horrified, or simply afraid to react, because reacting is dangerous. When a Tsar dies naturally, people mourn. When a Tsar dies like this, people watch who mourns and who does not, and above all, people ask the question that cannot be answered in public. If Paul can be removed by force, Can Alexander be removed the same way? A coup only works if the capital accepts it, and acceptance is bought with a story. What story did they tell Russia the next morning, and what did they hide in the wording? Switch perspectives. Imagine you're Alexander hearing footsteps in the palace, because the next sound tells you whether you're about to become Tsar. The conspirators now face a second problem. They have to become invisible. A successful coup does not end with the act. It ends when the actors vanish into the new order. Some will be rewarded. Some will be protected. Some will be quietly pushed aside because they know too much. And some will live the rest of their lives listening for footsteps in the night. Alexander must build a reign while standing on unstable ground. He cannot openly praise the men who killed his father. He cannot openly punish them without admitting the truth. So he must do what monarchs often do after a palace crime. He must govern through silence. But silence has consequences. It turns the assassination into a ghost story that never leaves the corridors. It turns politics into a series of unspoken threats. And it teaches the elite a terrible lesson. Violence works. At least it works once. But does it ever stop working once it has been proven? Quick recap. Here's what we know so far, and the one detail that still doesn't fit. Some conspirators later lived comfortably. Others disappeared into silence. Who got rewarded? Who got erased? And what does that tell us about who truly authorized the killing? Paul's death is not just a personal tragedy. It is a crack in the idea of divine authority. For generations, Russian autocracy rests on the image of the Tsar as untouchable. Yet in the Green Chamber, touch is exactly how the Tsar is killed. Hands. Cloth. Weight. No thunderbolt. No miracle. Just men. That detail spreads like acid. It changes how power feels. If men can do this, men can do anything. And once you see the ruler as mortal in the most intimate way, you cannot unsee it. Alexander inherits an empire that is both relieved and infected. Relieved because Paul's unpredictability is over. Infected because the method of the ending sits under the new reign like a bad foundation. The new Tsar will face wars and diplomacy and reform. He will also face a private question that follows him everywhere. What did he know? Was he complicit? Was he helpless? Was he helpless? Was he grateful? In politics, perception can be more powerful than evidence. And the evidence is kept behind palace doors, so the empire fills the gaps with stories. But which story is closest to the truth, and who benefits from it? One foreign power had more to gain from Paul's removal than anyone in St. Petersburg. Was this a domestic vendetta, or did the money and pressure come from abroad? Everything you've heard so far depends on witnesses who survived, and the most important witness didn't. There is also the question of Paul himself. History likes neat categories: mad tyrant, enlightened reformer, victim, villain. Paul resists neatness. He attempts changes that some might call necessary. He imposes discipline that many experience as cruelty. He shows concern for order. He also shows obsession. He is both ruler and hostage to his own temperament. And temperament matters in an autocracy. In a system without safeguards, a ruler's moods become policy. A ruler's suspicions become arrests. A ruler's anger becomes exile. So when people argue about Paul, they are really arguing about something larger. Is Russia safer with a strong hand that cannot be questioned? Or is Russia safer when even the strongest hand can be forced to let go? The assassination answers that question in the most brutal way. It says the court will impose limits if the ruler will not. But it does not say those limits will be just. It does not say those limits will be stable. And it does not say who will be next. If the murder of a Tsar becomes a tool, how long before it becomes a habit? If Paul's death was an accident, the cover-up would be sloppy and rushed, but parts of it look rehearsed. What was prepared in advance, the coup or the murder? In the years that follow, the Green Chamber becomes more than a room. It becomes a warning. Every ruler after Paul understands, in some way, that palaces can turn. Guards can switch sides. Courtiers can become executioners. And loyal smiles can hide a plan. That awareness shapes how rulers rule. It shapes their relationship with the nobility. It shapes their treatment of the army. It shapes how close they allow people to stand. And it shapes the language of power, because after a palace assassination, everyone learns to speak in half-truths. To imply rather than accuse. To threaten without saying the word threat. But the room itself remains, in memory and in story, as a place where the state and a human body collided, a place where politics became physical, a place where men convinced themselves they were saving Russia while they ended a life. And somewhere in that collision is the final moral question. Was Paul's death the removal of a danger, or the creation of a precedent? If it was both, which part did Russia pay for longer? Now return to the beginning, to the forced door, to the candlelight, to the nightshirt. In many retellings, the assassination becomes a drama of villains and heroes. But in real palaces, it is rarely that case. The men who stormed the Green Chamber likely believed they were rational. They likely believed they had no choice. They likely believed the country would thank them. And yet they still had to do it with their own hands. That is the part that should not be smoothed over. Because when a state decides to kill its ruler, it is not just changing leadership, it is changing its relationship with violence. Paul's final night shows how quickly political language collapses under pressure. Words like duty and stability and salvation last only until someone resists. Then someone reaches for a more direct solution, and afterward, everyone claims it happened differently. They argue about who struck first, who held him down, who wanted him alive. They argue because argument is a way to dilute responsibility. But the room does not dilute anything. The Green Chamber holds the blunt fact. A Tsar died there. So the story ends where it began, with a door that can be broken. If that door could be broken once, what stops it from being broken?